So, J. Ruud, what lovable book are we talking about today?
Well, I'll give you a hint. All this happened, more or less.
I don't know. I'll need another hint.
Okay.
Welcome to Between the Covers, the podcast where author J. Ruud and I, author Stacey Margaret Jones, discuss one lovable novel each episode from J. Ruud's carefully cultivated list of the 100 most lovable novels in the English language.
Yes. And since we've been on a hiatus for a bit, and we're starting what we're going to call season 2 of the podcast, I wanted to remind people we have done 21 episodes so far, so we have 21 books from this list. And just to review, in case you've forgotten during the vacation, so far the list goes like this. Catch-22, number 1. Pride and Prejudice, number 2. Never Let Me Go, number 3. Atonement, number 4. To Kill a Mockingbird, number 5. The Catcher in the Rye, number 6. The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, number 7. David Copperfield, number 8. The Great Gatsby, number 9. Song of Solomon, number 10. Wolf Hall, number 11. Pale Fire, number 12. Watership Down, number 13. 1984, number 14. Brave New World, number 15. Farewell to Arms, number 16. The Things They Carried, number 17. Midnight's Children, number 18. Moby Dick, your favorite, number 19. Babbitt, number 20. And number 21 is The Complete Tales of Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay.
So
that's the list so far.
So far. But now, as far as today's
Well, I need another hint.
goes,
Have I read this book?
Yes, you have.
Oh, man, I hate it when I can't guess the ones I've read.
The second clue is an anti-glacier book.
Third clue, please.
Third clue, Tralfamador.
Did we? And we probably just read it.
No, it's
Okay.
been a while.
What?
The planet Tralfamador. Does that help?
No.
Okay. This is, I want to talk about Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five today.
Yeah, I have not read that. I read that book probably, how old am I? 55? I probably read that book 35 years ago. 32, 30. Anyway,
Well, then,
it's been a while.
it's been a while.
I've forgotten the specifics.
You're justified in not remembering Tralfamador.
All right. So this book is on your carefully cultivated list. Who else thinks this is a lovable book?
Well, Modern Library, in its famous 1998 list of the 100 best English language novels of the 20th century, put it at number 18 on that list. Time magazine, in its 100 best English language novels since 1923, which is the birth of Time magazine, included it in that list. It's not a numbered list. Literary Hub came out with a list of quintessential American fiction according to the rest of the world.
Oh,
And on that list, it ranked as number 4.
oh, wow.
On the Library Journal's Books of the Century, it ranked number 14. On NPR's list of the top 100 science fiction fantasy books, it ranked number 19. And on the website of the greatest books of all time, which is the amalgamation of more than 450 lists, it comes in as 34th among English language novels. So lots of people rank this highly.
Well, it is a respected book, obviously. What year did it come out?
1969.
Okay. All right. So can you meet the challenge of the down and dirty summary when it comes to Slaughterhouse-Five?
Well, Let's see. This is it's a semi-autobiographical novel that follows the life of the protagonist, whose name is Billy Pilgrim. And the chief focus of the book is the firebombing of Dresden in 1945 by the Allies. And Billy Pilgrim, like Kurt Vonnegut, is a prisoner of war in Dresden at the time of the bombing, and is quartered in a slaughterhouse, which is where the name Slaughterhouse-Five comes from. Survives the bombing, but afterwards is put on detail to find the bodies that are buried under the rubble. And essentially, Billy Pilgrim has a hard time, dealing with that. He has a nervous breakdown and is put in a hospital. But then there is another section of the novel where he is taken. I guess this is getting away from your down and dirty summary. But it is important to mention that he is taken prisoner aboard a UFO and taken to the planet Tralfamador and put in a zoo for a while.
Okay. I'm going to say you're just going to barely skate by on that because you were self-aware to catch yourself going into too much detail. That was pretty good. That was good.
All right.
And relative to how you normally do on these, it was very good. Grading on the curve of J. Ruud, A. Okay. All right. So why is this book lovable to you? Because I think that's something, again, that we have to stress about your list is that, it's not your list isn't good for you books, although some of them are good for you to read. But you pick books that you loved reading, right? They are enjoyable to read as well as, other things that they do well particular to that book. So why is this book lovable?
There is a personal connection because this became popular in 1969, time of the most radical, I guess, objections, protests against the war in Vietnam. And because it's an anti-war book, it caught on at the time and became very popular. But it's not just that. It's the Vonnegut in general is a likable reader. He writes humorous books.
Likable writer?
Likable writer, yeah. He writes humorous books. He writes them in simple language that anybody can read. He's very Hemingway-esque, I guess. It's
very accessible.
Language. Yeah. And the books aren't very long, so almost anybody can read this book and love it. But it does have some really serious themes, and they're done in a really clever way.
Yeah, I remember, as I said, I don't remember the book incredibly well, obviously, because I read it a long time ago. But that's what happens to me with books over time is that I remember how I felt, right? Not necessarily what happened. I remember what it was about. I remember that feeling also that I had at the Book of Mormon where you're laughing, but you feel like you shouldn't be laughing.
Yeah.
Right? Like some of it's kind of iconoclastic humor, right? But also feeling such profound horror and despair while reading that book.
Yeah, it's a profoundly despairing book, which it's hard to say that's lovable, but there's something that it's Tralfamador that gives Billy Pilgrim the way of dealing with his problem with the past.
Right.
Vonnegut had the same problem with the past. He deals with it by writing the book. In the book, Billy Pilgrim is kidnapped by these aliens from Tralfamador. He's put in this zoo, and he learns their point of view. He learns their view of things. And one of the main things he learns on Tralfamador is the true nature of time. At least the way humans from Earth look at time is incorrect, according to the Tralfamadorians. The Tralfamadorians believe that every moment of your life is always in existence. I'm going to read what he actually says. The most important thing I learned on Tralfamador, Billy tells people. He actually becomes a kind of motivational speaker, and this is what he tells people. The most important thing I learned on Tralfamador was when a person dies, he only appears to die. He's still very much alive in the past. So it is very silly for people to cry at his funeral. All moments, past, present, and future, always have existed, always will exist. The Tralfamadorians can look at all the different moments just the way we can look at a stretch of Rocky Mountains, for instance. They can see how permanent all the moments are, and they can look at any moment that interests them. It's just an illusion we have on earth that one moment follows another one, like beads on a string, and that once a moment is gone, it is gone forever. And
that makes me cry. It's so moving.
And Billy Pilgrim is unstuck in time, we're told.
Right.
And what he does in the book is visit different moments of his life. When you first read the book, it seems like, this is just a bunch of incidents following each other, not following each other in any cause-effect way or any logical plot. It's just, here's an incident, here's an incident, here's an incident. And It goes from 1945 to 1955 to 1969 to 1947, haphazardly almost. But it's really kind of as Billy's mind is thinking about one thing and goes back to another.
But also, I mean, we know with the kind of expert writers, it may feel haphazard, and it is the opposite of haphazard, right? It's carefully crafted to create an effect in the reader, right?
Yeah, because there are relationships you can see between what happens in 1969 and what happened in 1947. Mm-hmm. The title page of the book says Slaughterhouse-Five or the Children's Crusade. And below that on the title page it says, it's a novel somewhat in the telegraphic schizophrenic manner of Tales of the Planet Tralfamador. And that doesn't mean anything to you when you read that on the title page. But on Tralfamador, Billy talks to some of the Tralfamadorians once he's learned their language. He's there for quite a while.
Clearly.
He asks why their books are laid out the way they are, because he can't make anything out of their books. They seem like just like a bunch of telegraphs. And he's told each clump of symbols is a brief, urgent message describing a situation, a scene. We Tralfamadorians read them all at once. There isn't any particular relationship between all the messages, except that the author has chosen them carefully so that when seen all at once, they produce an image of life. There is no beginning, no middle, no end, no suspense, no moral, no causes, no effects. What we love in our books are the depths of many marvelous moments seen all at one time.
It seems like, I mean, I read the book, as I said, and I don't remember the specifics, but the way you're talking about it now, it seems like to read this book is also to have a kind of experience like a mystical experience, because you're learning something experientially that can't be imparted to you in words. What's that word for mystical experience, that where you get knowledge without, you get this kind of input of knowledge, so to speak, because you've experienced something mystically that can't be explained to you outside of the mystical experience.
Yeah.
What's the word I'm looking for? Noetic, right. And it seems like the novel has the potential to create this noetic experience for readers. Yeah. Which is, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
Because it gives you an experience of time, of being outside of time.
Yeah. which is
part of a mystical experience.
Yeah, it's also
or can be
one definition of eternity.
Right, being outside of time.
Outside of time.
Yeah.
Because from the point of view of eternity, past, present, and future are all things that you can see at the same time.
Yes.
And also one other aspect of mystical experiences are they're passive. You have no control over anything that's happening.
Right.
And this is another of the
you
things
can't
that
evoke them, and you aren't in charge of them.
Yes. And this is something that Billy Pilgrim learns on Tralfamador also, that he has no control over past, present, and future. And in fact, there's a sign in his office. He becomes an optometrist, and there's a sign that's the AA prayer. Lord, let me
accept the things I can't control.
Things I cannot change.
Yeah.
Change the things I can, and
the wisdom to know the difference.
Know the difference. And Vonnegut says some of the things that Billy Pilgrim couldn't change are the past, the present, and the future.
Wow.
He had no control. It's a profound book in that sense.
Yeah, well, I hadn't thought of it that way until you started talking about it, his experience on the planet in that way. Also, I think I've learned more about mystical experiences since I read the book. So when I read the book, I might not have been aware of some of these kind of features or attributes of mystical experience. I wouldn't have applied it when I read that book because I didn't know about them per se.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't thought of it that way myself until you brought it up.
Look at us.
The book has a very interesting first chapter because it doesn't start with Billy Pilgrim. He's in the next. His story begins in the next chapter, which begins with Billy Pilgrim was unstuck in time. But the first chapter is Vonnegut. He starts by saying all this happened more or less because. It does follow his own experiences somewhat, but then there are things that are different. Like I don't think he actually ever was on Tralfamador.
Right. Well, that also reminds me of How to Tell a True War Story. Mm-hmm. Because it kind of happened.
Yeah,
right?
It kind of did.
And the story, in some ways, may be truer than what happened.
Maybe. But the first chapter is about Vonnegut himself trying 20 years later to come to grips with what happened to him in Dresden and to finally write a book about it.
Right.
And this friend of his says, so it'll be an anti-war book? And he says, yeah. And the friend says, you might as well write an anti-glacier book.
Oh, well, that's a little inside baseball, if you ask me, as a hint. Thank you very much.
Well, I didn't want you to get it right away. Anyway, but it's an anti-glacier book because you have as much chance of changing.
I get it.
And stopping wars as you do as stopping glaciers.
Turns out we're not so bad at stopping glaciers.
Yeah. That it's kind of lost its poignancy with global warming, but anyway, he goes to see a friend of his from the war and to try to get some help him remember some of the things that happened, and the guy's wife gets really angry as they're talking and says, "You're going to write this book, and they make a movie about it, and John Wayne or somebody is going to play the main character, and it'll make everybody think wars are great. Oh, they're very exciting and romantic. We should have another one." And then she says,
"Sorry,
you were just babies at the time,
right?"
And she's got babies sleeping upstairs that she's afraid are going to end up having to go to war themselves because of books like this. And Vonnegut promises her it's not going to be a book like that,
right?
And
well, it wasn't
for her, and for her sake, he gives it the subtitle, "The Children's Crusade."
Right. Okay. Well, I do want to mention, if you can hear some ambient noise, or if you're watching this.
Or if you just heard that.
That was Sylvia, our almost 1-year-old King Charles Cavalier Spaniel. So she would make a lot more noise if she weren't in the room with us. So she has to be here. But I think she also likes the book talk. But Sylvia would like to know why somebody might not love Slaughterhouse-Five.
Well, there have been many people over the years who have not loved Slaughterhouse-Five and had wanted to ban it. It's one of those books that's always on the list of the most often banned books. Sometimes it's to some of the language. Some people object to some fairly, not graphic, but at least pretty frank sexual scenes that Billy Pilgrim has while he's on the planet Tralfamador with this movie star named Montana Wildhack, who the Tralfamadorians have kidnapped to be his mate in the zoo.
Oh, right.
So, there's a few of those things. And of course, there's been objections to his kind of pointing out what really is a kind of a war crime that the Allies committed in bombing Dresden. Even though, it's always, well, look at what the Nazis were doing to other people. So they deserved it themselves. Right.
We don't commit war crimes.
No.
They commit war crimes.
And then we just, take revenge on them.
Right.
It's been banned and taken out of high schools and things like that. There's one famous example in North Dakota, 1973, I think. There was a school district that actually took all the copies of Slaughterhouse-Five and burned them.
Oh!
And while they were at it, threw on the fire books by Ernest Hemingway.
It's hard to stop the
John
momentum
Steinbeck,
when you get going, isn't it?
And William Faulkner.
Well, it sounds like it happens a lot with such books that people who struggle with nuance, or who haven't even read the book, have
almost never have read the
issues
book
with what they perceive. Whereas reading the book, it's something I talked about with my introduction to poetry students, which is the level of maturity that you can achieve if you can sit with uncomfortable feelings or sit with things that oppose each other and let them be. Try to understand them. Don't fight it, right? Just, it's amazing, right? And books like this invite you to do that, right? That's the experience of this book, is to read it and sit with things that oppose each other, that may oppose what you perceive of the world, perceive of what it means to be not just an American, but a person, right?
Yeah.
So if that is something you don't like to read, you may not like this book.
No.
Especially, it sounds like it might be hard in its postmodernism because of the episodic nature of it. Some people may not find that enjoyable if they're looking for a page turner plot, this to this to this to this.
Yeah.
They just might not enjoy the book in that way.
Yeah.
So,
Vonnegut himself, he says in the book at the end of the first chapter that this book is a failure. And it had to be.
Meta.
Because, he says he and his friend actually went back to Dresden in the 1960s and to just look around and see what it was like. Vonnegut says that 135,000 people died in the fire bombs. She says that in the book. More recently, both the Germans and the Americans have agreed on a figure 25,000. Only 25,000 that were killed. But still, it's 25,000
It's still 25,000 people.
Non-military people.
Right. Non-combatants.
Yeah. But while he was in Dresden, he took his Gideon Bible out in his hotel room, and he was reading it, looking for tales of great destruction as he had experienced in Dresden. And he came to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, which were full of vile people, he says, as, Americans would have assumed were living in Dresden in 1945. And he says he loved Lot's wife because she was told not to look back. And she looks back, and she's turned into a pillar of salt. Lot's wife, of course, was told not to look back where all those people in their homes had been, but she did look back. And I love her for that, because it was so human. So she was turned into a pillar of salt. So it goes. That's a refrain in the book.
Right,
every time somebody dies, you say, so it goes. Because, of course, there's nothing you can do about it. That's the way it goes.
That is the way it goes.
And he says people aren't supposed to look back. I'm certainly not going to do it anymore. I've finished my book now. The next one I write is going to be fun. This one is a failure. And it had to be, since it was written by a pillar of salt.
Oh. Wow, that's chilling.
Yeah.
Well, where are you ranking this on your list that we just revisited? You can give us where the number is and what comes before and after.
I think I'm going to put it right before Catcher in the Rye and right after To Kill a Mockingbird.
So what are those ranks? What numbers?
So that it would make it number 6.
Oh, okay. All right.
Because I think everybody I know who's read this book thinks of it highly.
Yes. Well, it is, as you said from your list, it's respected, but there are a lot of reasons, obviously, to love it and to love reading it. One of the things I talk to my students about, both in Intro to Poetry and in Intro to Creative Writing, is that I personally love sad things. I think it's because it's an opportunity to feel sad and to explore that kind of part of your emotional spectrum in a semi-safe way, because you're empathizing, right? Your understanding of the world and the human condition is growing, and yet you still may be safe in your house, right? But the sadness here is so big, but it sounds like he works really hard to make it accessible in very inventive and imaginative ways.
Yes, he does.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That was a great one. Sorry I didn't remember it.
You're allowed not to remember things. It must be time for Chaos Reader.
It is. So I don't think I've talked about this yet. I started this year with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Well, I read a book before this. I don't think I've talked about yet. But I'm currently reading a biography of Ruth Bader Ginsburg by Sharon DeHart. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, A Life. And I'm within 50 pages of the end. And it's just been so readable. I really enjoy it. And it's just a great chance to understand such a trailblazing woman and see what she tried to do for us, and did a lot in her own personal way. And I think if there's something to take away from it, it is to be the best at being you, right? She was just an amazing student. She was very determined. She was very meticulous. And of course, law then is a natural area for her. But also another thing I took from this was that as a feminist, I see the importance of feminist men because we wouldn't have her if she weren't married to her husband, who she and he decided together that they were going to pursue the same profession so they could talk to each other about it, right? So they could have something to share at dinner. And he was never threatened by her. He did everything he could to advance her career, and he was a renowned and highly respected attorney himself. She was also nominated, of course, for different judgeships in the high court by men, right, who had to say, I'm going to use some of my influence and power to lift a woman up, right? And that, it requires the people with power and influence to help the people who deserve it but can't get there, right? And then that's what she did once she got on the court, was try to protect that. Not as an activist, but as someone who understood the law. And also, she's just a really funny, kind of interesting person. And it's really lovely to kind of spend time with her now that she's gone. So, highly recommend. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, A Life. So,
awesome.
All right.
Well, for those of you who are watching rather than listening, you might have noticed we have a new studio here.
For our new season.
And if you happen to be allergic to dogs
on
podcasts, you might...
This might not be for you.
This might not be the podcast for you.
Because we don't only have Sylvia. We have 3 more dogs. They may make appearances from time to time. So...
at least make their presence known.
Yes. So we would like to thank our producer, creative director, everything, Jerry Bruno, for helping us switch out to a home studio and help us with all of our technical stuff. That we're not the best at. So please, and also if you like this podcast, you might like our books, Treasure of Sherwood, and by J. Ruud, and Mr. Catherine by Stacey Margaret Jones. And we would like to ask you to tell your friends about our podcast. Just tell 1 or 2 book-loving friends that here's a podcast they may enjoy, and like, share, review. It helps us get noticed so that we can keep bringing you one lovable book a week. And with that, we will see you next week.
Between
the covers.